welcome back our audience. Happy New Year to Season 7 of Tech Conversations, presented by the FIU Radcliffe Art and Design Incubator. And I want to welcome in one of our own FIU alumni, artist and entrepreneur, Ana Cristina Cash. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. I love Miami.
I mean, we're so excited. We know you just had a moment here in our hometown at FIU, being one of the first to be featured in that FIU alumni wall. And we couldn't be more proud to feature somebody who's from Miami, from the 305, who really represents every single thing that really an artist and an entrepreneur stand for. And we're going to get to it in this conversation. We're not only talking about music, but we're talking about the business side of Ana Cristina. So let's kick it off. Describe Ana Cristina in one word.
So I would say if I had to choose one word to describe me, it would be creative, because being creative is the driving force of everything I do when I wake up in the morning. I'm always finding creative ways to do things. And that does not necessarily just mean music. It means in cooking. I love to cook. It's the way I express myself. It's through fashion. I always try to find different things that I identify with. And being a creative just moves my life forward.
Well, I certainly know, and those that follow you, your fans and people listening to this podcast, know you're extremely creative. As we see you take the stage, how you really embody these characters and how you want to really put out there the songs with the way that you create your own self and the words you write. Because some of the songs that, if not all of them, are written by you, correct?
Correct. So I write the majority of my own songs either by myself or in collaboration with people, but I also do covers too, but writing is a huge part of what I am. I'm a creative writing major, essentially, like for my master's. And of course, at FIU, I studied broadcast journalism, and I had to do a lot of writing in that program. As you know, you're a journalist yourself, and it's a different kind of writing because it's more factual. And if there's something that FIU taught me when I was there, my professors always said to stay ahead of current events. So I would wake up and look at the news every single day, and actually, that's a habit that stayed with me that I actually learned from FIU. They made me very conscious of that. And that feeds kind of what my writing is like now, whether I'm writing a song or I'm starting to dabble in fiction or the way I express myself. I think being aware of current events and what's happening in the world and not being blinded by things but not only world news, but community news, like what is happening in your community? How do you feel about this? Because then you can explore your emotions and all of that when you're writing songs.
So for some of the people that may not be following the whole thing, some people may have just joined your fan base, or some of them have been following you for a while because you are from Miami. I think one of the biggest things that we know about you from all the interviews you've done over the years is that you actually started at a very young age. And in Sábado Gigante, which I think the entire United States Hispanic population was watching for a number of years. So let's give our audience a snapshot of your journey. Take it away.
So when I was about 3 or 4 years old, my grandmother discovered that I was singing Sleeping Beauty with the TV. So there was a scene where Sleeping Beauty was singing in the forest with the little animals, and I would do like all the operatic stuff, and I would try to mimic it. Or I'd watch the movie Annie, for example. I'd sing Tomorrow, and then my grandma told my mom, she's like, I think she can sing. And my mom was like, that's ridiculous. All kids sing. Don't say that again. So my mom didn't really pay attention at that time. There really were no singers in my family. Like later on, as my nieces were born, they took up singing, they took up instruments, but there was nobody for me to really look to, essentially, except my grandfather's sister, who I'd met, was a great aunt, my great aunt. She was an opera singer in Cuba, not professional, just a studied one, but because they were very conservative, the family, they didn't want her touring at the time because it was frowned upon in Cuba and all of this. So she didn't get to really live out her dreams. And she told me when I was a little girl, because I got to meet her, even though she died when I was young, follow your dreams no matter what. I didn't really get to follow my dreams. And I wanted to tour. I wanted to be a singer. I wanted to move ahead in what I was doing and not just like stay local. So I started, at St. Kevin Catholic School first in Miami, and I would sing at teachers' weddings. That's pretty much how I started, in church, in the choir. And really, church was the foundation of everything before Sábado Gigante. And then around the time I was 6 or 7 years old, I started taking voice lessons, and there would be the number at the bottom of the screen for Sábado Gigante when all the little kids would perform. They perform in groups, as you know, like in little musical numbers, and they do competitions. I thought these kids looked like they were having fun. I'm like, Mom, I want to do that. How can I get on TV? And they'd have a number at the bottom of the screen that said, if you're a child is inclined to performing or wants to be on the show, come audition for us. So I'm like, Mom, you got to call them. So I kind of like pushed my mom to call them, the whole thing. So I go for my big audition. I think I was like 6 or 7. And Maiten Montenegro, who's the producer of the children's
Mhm.
segment for Univision for Sábado Gigante, I auditioned for her. And she immediately took me under her wing. The very first thing I did, I think, was one of the musical numbers with the kids, and then maybe a competition or vice versa. But I think the first song I sang in competition was the Spanish version of Tomorrow, which is Mañana. And that was all choreographed. I had like my little background singers and everything. That there were these other little kids. And the competition experience was very interesting, because it was on national television, international television. There was probably a lot of pressure when I was little, but at the same time, I loved it. I never felt like I was forced into anything. It's something that was an internal drive since I was a little girl, essentially. So from there followed more competitions on Sábado Gigante, children's musical segments. Like I did one for Mother's Day. I remember it was called Mami, and all in Spanish essentially, because Maite Montenegro she was an artist herself in her native Chile, and Mario, the host
Right.
of
He was also from Chile, right?
there's kind of like a big community of Chilean talent that were either in production or the musical stuff. And Manuel Castro, who I think does is it dance talent? He has a dance company in Miami too. Manuel was the choreographer for the kids, Manuel Castro.
Wow.
And there's many Chilean people, actually, the community of folks. And then Maiten had an academy called MDA Studios in Miami where she helped train all these kids. And I signed up for classes with her, and so I trained in anything from like comedy segments, but all in Spanish, which was interesting because, even though I grew up bilingual, it was mostly my grandparents that spoke Spanish because my parents
Right.
could speak Spanish. But you know how it is in Miami where we're bilingual and we speak Spanglish,
That's
So,
right.
and a lot of people who don't know what Spanglish is, it's just the fluidity of combining Spanish and English words together. And now that's actually a very popular thing in songwriting, whereas, a lot of people won't do just the English version or the Spanish anymore. It's very popular and very hip now to do Spanglish. So a lot of people are just doing Spanglish versions of things. And Cheap Margarita is one of my songs is Spanglish.
Yes, love cheap margaritas. That's
Thank
my
you.
name actually. So I'm
Um,
not cheap, but
Margarita?
yeah, Margarita's my name. Yeah, everybody calls me Maggie, but I
Maggie,
was
see?
named after my grandmother. Yeah.
So I want you to hear this. So my mom is Teresita on her birth certificate. Her middle name is Margarita.
Okay.
She's Teresita Margarita, and she doesn't like the way it rhymes, my mom, so she doesn't let anyone call her by her full name because of the rhyme
Oh
scheme.
my goodness. So what does she go by? Teresita or Margarita?
She goes by Teresita, but she doesn't
Okay.
fine with someone to call her Margarita every now and then, but she doesn't like them together.
That's how it is. A lot of people don't like being called those two names, and some people had 3 and 4 names. They didn't want to be called any of that.
It would have been Cristina Margarita, but Teresita Margarita, like the
Oh
rhymes
my goodness.
that just did her in. She doesn't like it. But anyway, going back to my past and everything on Sábado Gigante, it led to other things like the Cristina show. And then I switched
Hmm.
schools. Then I went to St. Thomas the Apostle, became very active in church singing there, still like in, early middle school, like 5th grade to 8th grade, I was there. And I not only ended up singing at more teachers' weddings, but in funerals as well. I was the only kind of like
Oh
child
Lord.
that
Okay.
they kind of called on, for that. And I didn't know what to make of that at the beginning, but I realized it's honoring somebody's loved one that has passed.
Right.
I felt like it was so serious, and I was almost like very sad at the beginning when I said
Hmm.
that. But then it's interesting. It helped me mature to do that because I knew that you're providing a service essentially as a singer. You're singing the Ave Maria or something for a loved one. So I was honored to be able to do that as well. But I had quite a range of opportunities. I'd performed at the Liga contra el Cáncer Teleton
Yeah, of course. Still
twice
going on. Yes.
during that time. And during one of those tapings, I met Celia Cruz and Pedro Knight.
Wow. How
You
crazy
know,
is that?
and I
Yeah.
know somewhere, I don't have the photo, but another little girl that I worked with on Sábado Gigante, because we were doing one of the musical numbers there, with all the kids. She has that photo somewhere, so somewhere laying around is a photo of me and Celia Cruz when I was 8, probably.
And you sang for President George W. Bush, right? Was it George W. that
Yes.
you performed for?
So that was later on. So as time progressed, at 15, 16 years old, I was signed by Sony Music, the Latin
Hmm.
Sony Music. And the way that happened, my eldest sister Marisa had a friend, Isabel, and Isabel was actually training my sister. My sister had just gotten a new job as a pharmaceutical sales rep. So she had my CD in the car when she was training with Isabel in the car, and my voice was playing. I had a few demo tapes. I'd gone into some studios just singing covers at the time. I wasn't really writing yet, or not anything I thought that was suitable enough for me to record. And
Mm-hmm.
I was starting to formulate my writing at the time. So I think I had a recording of Hopelessly Devoted to You and a few other things. I think a song by Faye, that I recorded, Vuelve, which I also did on the Cristina show. That segment was called La Patadita de la Suerte. So I guess
That
that's,
was great for you.
yeah, it was great. Like, so it was several different young artists, and she gave us a kick in the butt, and she's like, this is La Patadita de la
That's
Suerte.
what they, yeah.
Go perform your song, so she was highlighting young talent and everything. So that was a funny one. So yeah, so essentially from there, my very first record, um, and Isabel's friend was Angel Carrasco, who had signed me. He was like the senior A&R at Sony Music Latin. And I went in to meet with him. He had played the stuff for him, and he was very impressed. And I thought, okay, maybe I can get a job singing demos for Jennifer Lopez or for something.
Right? Oh
Just
my God.
anything. I'm gonna get a record deal. Nothing that was not even in my head, right? So I go to meet with Angel, who I'm still in touch with him and his wife today. He's retired from that portion of the record industry now. And they were very much looking for artists in Spanish. And this is like early 2000s. This is probably the year 2000. Britney Spears was out, Christina Aguilera was out, Jessica Simpson. So like that kind of pattern of girls in the Anglo market. So he very much saw me as someone that could do pop or pop Latino and kind of have that image of what was going on with the US female artists, essentially. So I think Christina Aguilera had just finished a Spanish album. So I think that was very much the prototype for what they were looking for at the time. And I was at the time just starting, very strong melodic voice, but I wasn't writing as much. I was just dabbling in writing. So they put me together with several Grammy Award-winning producers, including Emilio Estefan, including Quique Santander, with
Mm-hmm.
Estefano Salgado, with Manny Benito, Chris Rodriguez, and Jimmy Greco, Ray Contreras, Jose Gaviria. Andres Munera, like so many producers, essentially, Rudy Perez as well.
Mm-hmm. He's very well known too, yes.
He's actually a very good friend of mine still, and he just moved to Nashville. We're very close, and just like I'm close with Emilio, and we're all like a big happy family.
Yeah.
So essentially, I went from just, singing in church and singing on these television programs, which really prepped me for camera work later and interviews. I mean, I would say the biggest education and all of that was that, and to recording my first record with multi-Grammy award-winning producers. I was basically a little girl. But it was a wonderful opportunity because I got to learn from these people and listen to their expertise. And I was very moldable at the time. So they'd bring me songs, since I wasn't writing at the time in Spanish. And my job as an interpreter was to really pick songs that aligned with me at the time. The sound was more like pop balada, pop ballad, and then some Latin pop. And I'm still very fond of many of the songs on that record, honestly. And then I will note I had a vocal instructor from the time I was 8 or 9 till like my high school years, Luis Manuel Diaz, who's still alive and well. He actually attended the FIU event where I
Oh,
did.
wow.
And Luis, who's in his 80s now, he, it's very important to train in what you want to do. So I was always working on my range, working on my singing, working on it as a craft. And people don't realize it requires a lot of discipline, whether you're singing or writing. If you don't practice singing, you don't get to become a singer. If you don't perform live, you don't get to become a performer. So a lot of these things require action. And yes, while it's important now for a lot of young kids to be active on social media, gain a following, that's a huge other component that we didn't have at the time. We had to promote ourselves in different ways. Now there's this whole other online facet. I tell them not to forget about the live sector because they have to get out there and connect with people in person. And connecting with people online is amazing, and it does great things for the algorithm and brings up the numbers. But being a great live performer, honing your craft, being a songwriter, and it's very important. And because I'm a songwriter, there's a whole nother business in that, talking about business, called publishing. Publishing is a huge industry, more so than like if you were signed to a record deal and getting paid off of like the record sales. Essentially, our artists that write do really well from their publishing and also from touring. And that's the majority of where artists make money, is touring and songwriting.
So let's transition to my question about your writing, because to me, a lot of people take other people's songs, they don't really write, some are a combination. You write, I think, most, if not all, your songs. So,
Yeah.
tell me something that surprised you about yourself during the writing process. Just something that you said, oh my God, do you transport yourself to these places? Like what is that creative process of writing something like Cheap Margaritas, which is it's a Spanglish song, right? You did that one in Spanglish.
So it's funny enough, that's the only song on the record that I did not write, Cheap Margaritas. I did.
Okay.
So that was written by Erika Enger, by Jess Kane, Frank Ray, and Willie Breeding, who was one of the producers on it. And the reason why I chose that song to sing is because Willie, who is a co-producer on the record with, releasing the Sunshine State EP on January 30th, he's a co-producer with John, and we were missing songs, and he's like, I'm going to play this for you. I know it's not one that you wrote, but see if you can give it a chance. You know what I mean? And I listened to it. I'm like, this is very flirtatious. It's cool. It really resonates with people. And so I recorded it. And I think there's a lesson in that. And the lesson is the song always wins. So a lot of songwriters and artists are very precious about the things they write. And that's awesome. And I love, and honestly, I connect a lot more with the public also from the things I write as well. But it's very important to not let the ego of the artist get in the way, because the
Right.
song
So you chose it even though it wasn't written by you, because you thought
exactly.
you thought it had that Ana Cristina flair to it.
Exactly. So I will do things like that even though I write the majority of my stuff, because to me the best song wins. If I put my
I
songs
love
aside with something somebody else may have written,
Mhm.
and and a lot of those songwriters deserve a chance for their
They
songs to be,
really do.
because
They
it's
really do.
some of them aren't artists themselves and some of them don't sing. You know what I mean? So there's a fine line to walk with that, even though the majority of what I do is as a writer. So like other songs that I've written, like Daybreak, for example, that was a single this year. I wrote that with Gabby Scotto and Willie Breeding. And that was just a session that we showed up to. Like Jimmy Buffett had just passed away. And I always said from the beginning of this whole writing of the record, the whole process, I wanted this to sound lighter than things I'd done in the past. Not that anything was wrong with my other material, but I wanted it to be joyful. Especially after COVID, I feel like COVID, everyone was so enclosed, so isolated, so many people were in their head. I wanted something that was out there and not so much in here. You know what I mean? For the majority of the songs. And then I do have very introspective, brainy songs as well. But Daybreak was very light. It's just about having fun. It's about, thinking, being with your partner and just wishing you could escape, essentially. And then other songs like Janice, that's on this EP, I wrote entirely on my own with a guitar in my pool room. And it's about my very first childhood friend that I had, Janice, that eventually moved out of the West Miami area. The first house I lived in was close to the Everglades in West Miami. Actually, very rural at the time. This is like mid 80s I was born, and I moved out of that house when I was 5.5 years old. So there was nothing there, just four houses. Now that area is overly developed, overly populated. It's like Miccosukee is, right? And then I later moved to my house in East Kendall, like close to Dayland Mall area.
Mhm.
My parents still live, essentially. But I have memories of that before it was developed, and there was just a dirt road, and then you're very close to Coral Way and all that stuff still. But Janice was the very first friend I ever had, and she reached out to me again in 2021. She had moved to the Keys after she had lived in that house, and she's like, Annie, she used to call me Annie. I moved to Alaska, and I don't know if you've had a chance to listen to the full EP yet that's coming out. Have you had a chance to listen to that? The EP?
They sent me some links yesterday, and I was listening to some things, but I don't think I've listened to the full thing
Yeah,
yet. I know my
listen.
husband was listening in when I was playing it, and he was like, "I really like those songs."
No, that's
Who
awesome.
is that? And I said, it's Ana Cristina Cash. Because, these men sometimes, they're not. I asked my husband once, he had tickets to go see Ricky Martin. And he said, oh, I got these tickets to see somebody named Ricky Martin. Who is that? And I said, what? I'm like, give me those tickets. And I took somebody else with me. And I mean, they live like in another dimension. They have no idea what's going on most of the time.
100%, 100%. So yeah, listen to all of them, but in
Okay.
particular, Janice is very personal. The song Florida Girl as well. There's
Hmm.
elements of my childhood in that. So I talk about that same house. I have a visions, like even though I moved when I was 5.5, I have a visual
Hmm.
like orange trees in the backyard. So that
Hmm.
first verse in Florida Girl, you see there's visual imagery of these orange trees that were in my backyard. So I pull a lot from nostalgia on this record, you know. So
Mhm.
my writing process changes all the time. If I'm writing for myself, sometimes I'll just write on the guitar or piano and I'll come up with a melody. Or I'll start like, you know, I can program beats a little bit, you know what I mean? Or I'll listen to a beat and then with the producer, I'll create a beat, right? And I'll just write to a beat sometimes if I like the beat enough, because rhythm is very important in a song. Like what is it that makes people get up and dance? It's a certain BPM. If you listen to like all the Katy Perry pop stuff, that's all marching music. Like your brain is programmed like the army, like left, right. That's all like programming. You know what I mean? So rhythm is very important. Melody is the most important because if you listen to songs from ABBA, they're from Sweden, right? They're a Swedish band. There, you listen to a lot of these songs were written in English by non-English speakers. So a lot of the grammar is incorrect in those songs, and some of it doesn't make linear sense when you read the words. Yet, what do you remember from ABBA? It's the melodies,
Yep.
because melodies travel faster to the human brain than lyrics do, even though the lyrics are very important.
So
So
let's talk a little bit about the Opry because I know that this year specifically, Hallmark came out with a movie about the Opry that involves some time travel. And
yeah,
people love that. People love those movies and they love the Opry and it's gotten a lot of attention, I think, more than ever in the last couple of years.
yeah.
But you did your debut on November 9th, 2019. Talk about that moment because for someone like you, an artist that's been since they were a little girl, you know, inspired by music, what does it mean to be at the Opry?
Well, it means it's a tremendous thing for me. Like it means more to me than probably almost any other performance. Like I performed at some cool places. There are a lot of other ones that mean a lot to me, but performing at the Opry for my debut, November 2019, it was amazing because I'd performed at the Opry before with other artists. For example, I was invited 15 by John McEwen of the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, along with my husband John, but we were singing Carter family songs. And then again for something similar, but I'd never had the chance to perform my original songs, which I had written. So I performed my original song, Broken Roses, at the
Hmm.
Opry that night. I performed Tough Love Woman that I wrote as well with Sean Camp. And I got to perform those two songs. And those were compositions of mine that I got to sing for the first time. And I received a standing ovation. I started crying. My parents flew from Miami to see me. My sister, friends were backstage. I had a friend, Georgia Uribe, a Colombian friend of mine who was actually in leadership music here in Nashville. It's a program in Nashville for music industry professionals. He had gotten several senators and mayors and signatures, and he had Brad Paisley call me. My friend Loretta Lynn, Loretta was alive at the time. She wrote something on her page about my opera debut. Marco Rubio wrote me a letter, who was U.S. Senator at the time. You know what I mean? So all of
Hmm.
that, you know, and the mayor of Hendersonville like made it Ana Cristina Day, Cash Day, whatever. It was a big to do, essentially. The story starts in 2006 with Nashville, and I will explain the connection. So I don't know if you believe in manifestation at all or putting wishes out into the universe or just thoughts. I came to Nashville to visit with my mom and dad because I was going to work with a producer out of Hendersonville. I was actually out of my record deal with Sony Music Latin at the time. I wanted to explore options singing in English as well as Spanish. And so I was free from the record label at the time. So I was going to work with a producer out of Hendersonville. So I toured Nashville for the very first time and even had considered moving there in the future, but I ended up in California first. So Hendersonville, so is where my father-in-law, Johnny Cash, lived. It's where my husband, John, lived. It's when we were engaged and we moved together. That's where I lived. I lived there for nearly 10 years, essentially in Hendersonville. And that's where the Cash Cabin studio is. It's in Hendersonville, Tennessee. At the time in 2006, it was a suburban area, but not as populated as it is now. It's built up now more. So we stayed at the Hyatt Hotel in Hendersonville. My mom, my dad, myself, a girl from Miami, essentially. And I remember looking around Hendersonville, and I said, as we were leaving the trip, I'm like, I doubt I'll ever come here again, right? And on that same trip, I just remembered it so well. We decided to do a backstage tour of the Grand Ole Opry House.
Oh my goodness.
It gets better. So we're going to all the dressing rooms. We passed by Roy Acuff's dressing room. He was the general manager of the Opry, the first one, and everything. We go through all these dressing rooms. They bring us to the stage when nobody's there at this point. It's just the tour group. They bring us on stage. It's 2006. My dark hair, everything. Would anyone like to volunteer and step inside the circle to sing?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that circle's magical, huh?
Yes. So, I don't know if you've seen the circle itself,
Yeah.
but there's a different color wood that's in the circle. That's a piece of the Ryman Auditorium, which
Yes.
where
They
the
brought it from there, right? Is that my understanding? Yeah.
yes, and they still do Opry during certain seasons at the Ryman. And I actually made my debut at the Ryman, not the Opry House. This tour was done in the Opry House, but the majority of the times I get to sing at the Opry House, right? Anyway, my debut was at the Ryman, the original. So I get in this, I raised my hand. I said, I would like to, and I was very like shy about it because, I was always a fan of country music. So Miami Girl pulled out You Ain't Woman Enough by Loretta Lynn at that time. And I put on the spot and I sang it for the tour group. And so I sang Loretta Lynn, You Ain't Woman Enough. Push come to shove years later, and we'll get into the story about how I met John and everything. But when I moved to Nashville for the relationship, when I started working in Nashville, one of the very first artists I had a chance to work with was Loretta Lynn
Incredible.
in Hendersonville. Years later, I get to perform in 2015, maybe one other show at the Opry until I make my debut
Mhm.
original, which is the Ryman Auditorium. I'm like 13 performances in now. This year alone, I got to perform 8 times at the Opry. And all I thought at the time was, this is so cool. This is amazing. I love this place. And to get to go there later and not perform once, but so many times already at this point. And one never knows when you're going to get called back or not. You know what I mean? So you can't assume that you're going to be called back ever. You know what I
I mean,
mean?
I've seen your performances at the Opry. I hesitate to call you back. I mean, they're so animated. Like we are just talking about it before we did this. We do a little checkup with our guest always
Yes.
all these music moves that you have. I think the audience really gets into it and enjoys it because remember, country's all very nostalgic for the most part,
Yeah.
if you think
Yeah.
about it. And
Yes.
you're very animated on stage. Even your husband, John Carter Cash, looks like he's very animated out of his
Extremely
uh,
animated. He's a ham. He's that man is
yeah, I like that pineapple. What is it? Pineapple
Pineapple
John?
Johnny. You know
Love
your
it. I love that.
it's
I'm
a
a
great
big fan
record.
of that. So
That's a
let's
great
talk about now that we're talking about this beginnings of yours and manifestation. You meet John Carter Cash in LA. Talk about that encounter.
yeah. So first off, after leaving Miami, after graduating from FIU and all that, like years later, I'm sitting at a bar in LA, which I'd moved to LA to continue pursuing music. It was a huge time of growth for me. I was very much alone. I moved alone, went over there, like everything was so tied into cinema culture. So there's a whole nother layer other than the Latin music in Miami and all of that. I come to Los Angeles. There are more independent singer-songwriter venues. There is this whole cinematic culture where I had friends that were filmmakers, camera operators, they were crew for movies, other musicians. So I just soaked all of that in as a time where, I was working and doing different gigs, getting paid, singing demos for people, and working on actually another album out there. The West Coast Sessions was a record I worked on out there. So my writing got better out there. I would book my own shows, and it was a huge time of growth. And it's very important for me to say that first because Los Angeles was very important to my growth. So the Sunset Marquis Hotel, which is they call the music hotel. So I ended up moving from Hollywood. The first 2 years I spent in Hollywood, very close to the Grauman's Chinese Theater and all that. In my third year, I moved to West Hollywood. And right down the street, just like in that same block, there's a hotel called the Sunset Marquis Hotel. I didn't even know it was like the music hotel. That's where all the rock stars hang out and the celebrities and all the stuff, and because it's a very private area. So that just became like my neighborhood go-to place. Like if I wanted a glass of wine or something, I'd go. So I had been writing, it was like a very early night, probably like around 6 or 7 p.m. And I was very stuck. I was actually writing a song. I had writer's block. And I said, I need to get out of here. I'm going to take some space. I'm going to go grab like a glass of white wine next door. Right. So I go walk over there by myself. I was wearing sweatpants. I did not look impressive. I honestly, I didn't look like I was trying to find a man
That's
at
usually
all.
how it happens.
I had no make. I was very much like no makeup, almost like this, but like I had a black jacket on, a black shirt, and black pants is all I remember. And I was sitting at this bar having my little glass of wine. These two men are 2 stools from me. John, super thick Southern accent. That's all I can hear. I wasn't even paying attention to them. And his friend Garrett had dreadlocks down his back, like braided dreadlocks down his back. And in my mind, I'm like, who are these people?
You're like, what? kind of weird people are at the bar. Let me leave now.
There was nobody there but them. They were the only two patrons there but me, essentially, and people didn't fill in till later, but I didn't even stay like long enough to find out, except like talking to John. I talked to John for a long time, actually. So yeah, people started to trickle in. But so essentially, John's two stools down from me. He sits in the stool next to me. So he's like here. He's like, hi, with
Hi.
this Southern accent, and hi, how are you? So we're just chatting, having a few drinks and everything. And didn't really tell me of his background. He was just John at this point. So there was nothing of his parents, nothing like that. We were just talking and connected about music and everything. We ended up talking for like hours about very interesting topics. So this was not something shallow that was on the surface, somebody trying to hit on me necessarily. He was actually very polite. And he had been divorced already at that point when we met and everything. And so essentially we exchanged information. The next day we hung out and sang karaoke, and then he went back to Nashville and nothing happened, essentially, and then like months later, he started texting me, and we were texting back and forth, and said, I'm going to Los Angeles. Would you like to have dinner with me? So this is 9 months later after we'd met. He asked me to go to dinner. I'm just like, okay, who knows? I didn't know if I was interested in him or not necessarily, but like we had a connection clearly that was like,
Clearly, the
so
music brought you together, the creative process, all
you-
that brought you together.
all
Yeah.
of us are, and like as time has gone by, because it's like now 12 years that we're together, I've come to know how much we really have in common. We grew up in two completely different places, which, by the way, he has embraced Miami and Cuban culture so much.
Wasn't he in some art exhibit I saw too? Like it's painted something.
Yes. So now he wants to be Mr. Art Miami.
My goodness.
He
He
wants to
came
get
to
into
the right place, Art Basel, right?
he wants to get into Art Basel. So no, he had his paintings featured in Art Miami, actually
Yes, we saw that.
in a professional gallery. So yeah, there's a feature. He's a visual artist too, and he just discovered that in the last 2 years that he's a visual
Oh,
artist.
wow.
Didn't even know, but he can actually paint. He paints abstract, surreal, but he actually can paint you exactly the way you are if he wanted. He just has
Okay. I mean, the Radcliffe welcomes all types of disciplines, but it was originally founded as an art and design incubator. And we
wow.
feature a lot of artists. So we would love to connect with John and connect him via Zoom
Yeah.
and this semester maybe he can talk about how the last few years, him turning from music sensation, with a legendary family into an artist. I mean, that's a topic right there.
He would be very honored, to
Yeah, I
showcase.
would love to have him. Please let him know, send me the contacts later to connect with whoever I
Yeah.
need to organize this with.
It's Christy is John's publicist too, so
Okay.
just arrange it with Christy, but he would be interested in seeing the gallery and placing some stuff in there too, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, I can send you pictures via email to her of what
Yeah.
our incubator looks like. And we have a wall of all the years that we've had. So there's a lot there, people making sneakers to, portraits, everything. I mean, but it was originally founded as an art and design incubator. It just evolved over time to include other people because, as you know, the artist and design pool could be small sometimes for entrepreneurs. Yeah.
Definitely. So yeah, he would be very interested in that because like as much as Tennessee is a part of my life and has been all these years, Miami is a part of his life now. So it's interesting. We have so many similarities. And the whole point I was trying to make is like we grew up in completely different spaces in completely different ways. I'm the child of Cuban immigrants. Essentially my parents don't sing. I love them. My father's an engineer who has an air conditioning company, successful Central Air Control. It's been in business since 1970.
wow.
They're entrepreneurs, my dad and my uncle did well for themselves, but through hard work. It's the Cuban immigrant story, essentially. And then my mom, was a teacher, but more a homemaker. She was taking care of us, essentially. But the origins are very humble. And his parents' origins were very humble. His dad grew up in the Great Depression, croppers, farmers, they picked cotton essentially until he just went to the army. The army was his way out. So, and his mom was from Appalachia, basically, poor area in Appalachia. And it's interesting because like both of our sets of parents came from the very bottom essentially and built themselves up. So I think there's a commonality there, even though it's in different disciplines. And John and I think so similarly in so many ways. Now, he's more of like an outdoor hunting person than I am. We don't agree there necessarily. You know what I mean? I'm not necessarily going to rough it out in the woods anytime soon, but
Yeah, I'm not an outdoor person. I'm the first one to admit it. And I went with my cousin not long ago. We went to Disney on a little cousin trip, and her kids were like, "Does Maggie realize that that's outdoors?" And I'm like, "My God, what perception do people have of me? Of course I know it's outdoors."
I'm like, so like I say, if we're ever gonna go camping, it's gonna be glamping.
Yeah, glamping. I'm there with you. I'm there with you. I don't do well in these spaces where there's not even, look, you're gonna laugh now. I
No.
have to have a fan next to me. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
people across time have seen me with my fan everywhere. And they're like, where is your fan now? Because in my desk, I had a fan clipped onto a wall. Like, it cannot be in any place that has humidity or heat, unfortunately.
No. I'm with you there, but essentially it's a very beautiful love story in the sense that we've both embraced these two very different cultures, these two very
Hmm.
different cities, and we're together, but like we have a little piece of like Nashville's very much mine, Miami's very much his at this point, you know what I mean? And he makes kahachina, by the way. He can
Oh,
do the
wow. So he uses cajachina to make the pork, huh?
no, he's been to Hialeah, got in
Oh,
the
wow. Picking up the cajachina.
yeah, he's no, he's in it to win it.
I
And
mean,
he
I love this. I love this. So let's talk about towards the end of this podcast. Let's
yes.
talk about your life, both of you, of artists and entrepreneurs, because from a young age, I also understand you started your own label. So being an entrepreneur is not new to you. So let's talk about the Cabin Cash Enterprises and anything else that you guys do as entrepreneurs, because this is great advice coming from both of you have built yourselves from the ground up.
Yeah, so I'll start from the very beginning. When I was 19 and was signed to my first PRO, which is ASCAP. Now I'm with CSAC. I switched companies.
Mhm.
At the time I was writing, I had several songs written. I was sending them to the copyright office. My father, a very educated man, made sure that I copywrote my songs, that I knew what copyright was, essentially. And then, through lawyers and everything, we figured out that I need to develop my own publishing company. So I started True Gift Music Publishing Company, LLC, at 19 years old. And, when I would send the songs to Washington for copyright, I would register my songs with ASCAP so they were protected. So that was my first company, was that. And then when I wanted to release, I released after I left Sony Music Latin. I created my own record label called True Gift Records, also 19 years old. Just independently run, did distribution through TuneCore because TuneCore was newer at the time. Like now everybody uses it. But it was like the first time I'd come out, it was a big tool. So I got productions made on my own. Like it was like a 6 to 9 song EP. It was called Time. It's not on the internet anymore, but they're like remnants of it online, essentially. Somehow I just didn't keep up with keeping it online. But essentially, I wrote every single song on that record at that age. I published them all, I released them, and I did promotions around it. And from there, as I moved to Nashville, as John and I get married, he always had his production company. He had Cash Cabin Productions. When we got married, we had to form a different company, which functions similarly. It's Cash Cabin Enterprises. So when his father passed away in 2003, the Cash Cabin itself, was not really a studio until the early 2000s. So like the studio portion of the cabin was not built. His father, Johnny Cash, had it kind of like as a place to get away because he lived across the street on Caudale Drive in a house by the lake, which burnt down. But that's another story. So he'd just go there to kind of write, to get away if like the house was too loud with a bunch of kids and guests, and he would go write. So it was essentially like a shack, It was just the kitchen portion. So in the early 2000s, John, his father was still alive when they started building onto it, but they built the control room later after the dad passed away, I believe. But they brought in a microphone, they built a vocal booth essentially. So he did a few of the American recording sessions in there, but the majority of the American recordings were done with Rick Rubin in California, actually. So a lot of people mistakenly think that American recordings by Johnny Cash was all recorded at the Cash Cabin. It wasn't. The majority was recorded with Rick in Los Angeles. But that was the beginning of the Cash Cabin as a studio, as a recording space. John adds on to it. So it starts working with other artists, developing skills on Pro Tools. He very much will tell you when you speak to him, he in many ways lived in the shadow of his dad because he didn't know who he was. And he's very open about this, about having his own identity. And he needed to figure out, who am I? Because he also sang, but people, when he'd release something, would be like, you don't sound like your dad. You know what I mean? And people are rude like that. Or for me, for example, who's had a career before I ever moved to Nashville, a lot of the people here will associate me as Johnny's daughter-in-law, John Carter Cash's wife, but they don't know the whole story. You know what I mean? They don't know that I've been a professional for all these years. You know what I mean? So people make
But here in Miami, we know that because we've been following you for decades and we know that you're homegrown talent and that this conversation was not going to be only about songs, but it was going to be you as an entrepreneur, because you have been building yourself from the ground up from an early age. And that is what true entrepreneurship is all about. And I love that you give these tips during our talk, because there's people listening. We tell the fellows at the incubator that they always need to register their things, create their LLCs. And I'm glad that you chimed in with that information.
Yes, and you have to be very aware, like when you're collaborating, when you're co-writing with people, that you discuss the splits ahead of time, that you get everybody's PRO and publishing company information. Otherwise, years later down the line, you need to use the song in like a commercial or something, and note the song wasn't registered. Nobody knows what the splits are. There's a lawsuit down the line. So it's very important to be responsible and organized with all of that. You know what I mean? So the point I was trying to make is that identity is very important. And when John was doing the Cash Cabin, the productions, which now is Cash Cabin Enterprises, he started taking on clients, learning Pro Tools. Identity that he found was very much in being a producer. He has thousands, over 10,000 hours or more in the studio. And that's what creates a professional. I have over 10,000 hours singing and writing, you know, so that's the 10,000 hours rule essentially. So you have to, you have to apply yourself. And now he has multiple Grammys as a producer. I did the Spanish version of La Prisión de Folsom, which, won a Grammy also for Johnny Cash. We have artists ranging from Loretta Lynn to, Okra Medicine Show, Chris Cornell recorded at the Cabin. There's been so many people like, Raul Malo, who's also from Miami, you know what I mean? Brad Paisley, Alison Krauss, like so many artists essentially have recorded at the Cabin. And we love to work with other people as well. And you learn from other artists and you want to help execute their vision, whether it's help like co-writing with them or getting the correct sound production wise as well. And, for very special cases, people also shoot videos there. So it's like a full functioning business as well.
I love it. I love that, the identity was, working with other people, being a producer, evolving, innovation, reinvention. I think this is what entrepreneurs are about.
Exactly. And I'm going now into the lifestyle sector, actually, like with my skills as a writer and my love for cooking, I'm writing a cookbook.
Oh my goodness. Are you saying this as like a premiere announcement that you're writing a cookbook?
Well, no, I don't announce it a lot, but I do tease it sometimes in different interviews. Like it's not ready yet, so I don't have any product to give anyone for a while, but it's been no secret, especially during COVID. I started posting more cooking videos. My goal in 2026 is to post a lot more cooking videos. So I'm going to start ramping it up really soon, but the music has taken a lot of time and the promo. Talking about business, I now run which on our record label, Avondale Records. And basically I've had to spearhead this release with my publicist, my management, all the people involved were working to promote it. But the majority of what I'm doing is running my label more so than even being an artist most of the time. It is a business, but it's approving things, approving the press releases, doing the interviews, it's getting ready to perform. It is release schedules, is getting all the supplies. It's now the social media aspect. You have to post on like 4 different platforms.
Yes, we know.
A long time out of your day. And that's not only for a musician, that's, a business owner, you're in the media, it's the media. We all now, it takes hours in a day to fix something, to get something perfect, to edit it. You know what I mean? And then you're dreaming up like ideas for a music video. You're getting your musicians together. And as an artist, you employ several people. You're publicists, there's managers, there are makeup and hair artists, there are musicians in the studio and for the live performances. There's so many different facets of this that you have to remember to breathe as well. I think probably something, I know I have a lot of fun stuff going on this year, but I also have a family. I have 2 children. I have a daughter that's 8 years old. I have a son that's 4 years old. I have a husband. So I have to make sure that I spend time with them as well. And it's a huge balance to be a female that's operating a business essentially, and to kind of just having a family as well. So it's balancing that, and
the work-life balance. Yeah. So let's end the podcast by telling our audience what's next in 2026, because I know you have a rollout of things happening.
Yeah, so in 2026, I'm releasing the Sunshine State album. It's on January 30th. And I am going to be working the studio on several English and Spanish versions of a new upcoming album after that, and several shows in between.
Oh my God, I can't wait to, see what comes next. I've been following you even before that. We were talking offline that somebody mentioned you. And I was like, I know who that is, that, because from Miami, the people from Miami where they are, at least if you want to follow where your people are, right? And I saw that you had, been at the Opry, and I became very interested. And then I saw that FIU had recognized you. And I said, oh my God, we've interviewed so many people. I said, let me reach out to Ana Cristina Cash because this is the perfect moment to talk to her, having been recognized. I think you're the first person that's been featured in that alumni spotlight, right? In that series
Yeah,
that they're
the
doing of
very
the
first one.
portraits, right?
It was a huge honor. Honestly, I got very emotional at the event because, you just go, go, go in your life. You don't realize how many things maybe you've done because, like, you always think to yourself, I guess when you're hard on yourself and you're a professional, like, maybe this is not enough. I need to do more. But then you look back, you're like, okay, I've done quite a bit. You know what I mean? Like, you don't realize when you're in the heat of the moment working that you have all this work that you've done. So I think it was great to recognize also the people that helped me in my life. I had several
That's true. Yes.
educators there as well, like people that were a part of my life. Not everybody, but several teachers. My voice teacher, like I said, was there. My last 2 years of high school, I was homeschooled by a wonderful woman through a program, an accredited program, because I was working. I was touring at the time. She was there. She actually really taught me how to study very well. And that led to my success when I got to the university. So a lot of mentors, I would say, because it takes a village to do anything. I don't
It
do
really
all.
does. Yep.
And a lot of people want to give the artists the glory. And yes, they're the driving force of their vision. They're the driving force of this. But it's very important to recognize the people around you that are supporting
I
you.
agree. I
And
agree.
like FIU is one of those institutions as well. Blanca, shout out to Blanca. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
Blanca Recio.
And like, there's so many
She's on
people.
the FIU Alumni Board, we should mention.
Yes.
We want to thank obviously the FIU Alumni Board, the FIU Foundation, everybody who played a part in getting Ana Cristina recognized with that honor.
It was an amazing day. Honestly, it was an amazing evening. And I'm super grateful. I'm glad that my story started in Miami. I still am back and forth going to Miami all the time. My parents live there, and I'm so proud of my community. I'm proud of everyone.
Well, we're very proud of you. I run this podcast. It was a passion project, a pilot project, actually, that's been going on for a couple of years. And I'm happy to lead it. I'm a founding producer of it. And I always enjoy talking to, people like yourself that have built themselves from the ground up and that, don't forget like you have. And I commend you for that. Not only where they started, but the people that helped you get there. That's always so important. And I think we forget that sometimes, or they're not just mentioned. So thank you for staying true to yourself, which is a very important part of this business, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's important to stay grounded. It's very easy to get lost in like, what people think about you, where you want to be, your image, this and that. But I think just being real, communicating with people, being kind, I think that's what matters.
I agree. And I want to thank you again for accepting our invitation. And you're welcome back anytime. Please contact when you're back in the area. We can connect virtually. And I want to wish you a happy 2026 with lots of health, more work-life balance for you and your family, and much more success.
Thank you. Thank you, Maggie.
You're welcome. To our audience, this has been season 7 of Tech Conversations.